You're listening to Big World Network.
Accidental Passion, Episode 8, Media Storm, read by Meagan Hedin. Warning! Although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. It is intended for mature audiences only and should not be read if you are uncomfortable with graphic sexual intimacy. Ryan was dead tired as he entered his hotel room and collapsed down on the bed, not even bothering to undress. It had been 24 hours since they had landed the crippled jet, and Angela had kept him busy with 3 appearances on talk shows and several news interviews. He hadn't been too happy about it, but she hadn't really given him much of a chance to object, and by the time he was aware of how much she was using the incident for publicity, the interviews had already been scheduled, and he had always worked hard to fulfill his public commitments and obligations once they were made. The subsequent reputation had served him well, often being able to call in favors with reporters and almost always guaranteeing him a spot as the first guest when he needed to promote a new book or movie. And for a man living in Detroit, he had made a lot of powerful friends in Hollywood. But now he was paying the price. He needed sleep and his mind was racing. This was the first moment he had been alone to think about the events of the last day. In fact, he hadn't even had much of a chance to think about having made love to Kim, which now seemed like so long ago. As he kicked his left shoe off using his right foot and then reversed the process, he reached in his pocket for his phone. Opening up his texts, he found the text Kim had sent him shortly after he landed and read it again. She had written, "I can still feel you next to me. I'm glad you're safe and I wish I could be there with you now." Putting his phone on the bed beside him, Ryan closed his eyes and imagined being with Kim again in the dark corner of the parking lot. He could almost feel her touch, her lips against his, and her beautiful body pressed tight against him. Growing hard from the memories of the previous evening before his flight, his hand found its way to his jeans, where he almost unconsciously rubbed his cock through the fabric, recalling the feeling of finally entering her after all these months. Too tired to actually pleasure himself, Ryan drifted off to sleep thinking about Kim and knowing he wanted to be inside her again, soon. It took several repeated knocks on the door before Ryan realized what the banging sound was. Disoriented and still dressed lying on the hotel bed, he rolled over onto his side to glance at the alarm clock on the end table just as another knock sounded. It was only 9:30 at night, even though Ryan felt as if he had been asleep for hours. "Just a moment," he called out, swinging his feet to the floor. Almost banging into the wall in the unfamiliar hotel room, he finally made it to the door with the little light available from the nightlight in the bathroom. "Who is it?" he asked through the closed door as he positioned himself to look through the peephole with his left eye. "It's Woods," the voice answered as his face came into focus through the distorted view. Ryan immediately moved his face away and undid the security chain and unlocked the door, standing off to the side to allow Woods to enter. "I've been knocking for 5 minutes. You must have been out cold," Woods said as he entered into the dark room. "Let me get a light on." He reached for a switch on the wall and turned it on. A bright light on the dresser and another light on the end table came on in response to the single switch, causing Ryan to squint while his eyes adjusted to the sudden brightness. "Yeah, I was beat," Ryan answered, letting the door slam closed as he entered the main part of the room behind Woods. "Hey, how the hell did you find me? I never told you I was staying here." "I'm a detective, remember? Besides, you always stay here when you're in L.A., if you're not crashing at my place." Woods plopped himself down on the end of the bed as Ryan sat down on the chair he had just pulled out from the room's desk. "So what have you learned?" Ryan asked. "I was going to ask you the same thing. Any word from the maintenance shop at LAX?" "They called after I finished taping an appearance on Late Night." "Big shot. I got my favorite booth at the deli tonight," Woods kidded. Ryan smiled. A well-earned sign of respect, I'm sure. "So what did maintenance say?" "It looked like a normal failure, and they wouldn't have suspected anything if I hadn't mentioned the possibility it was tampered with. But they found some scratch marks made from a tool of some sort that maintenance would never have caused." Woods laughed despite the concern in his eyes. "They called that a normal failure? You're a hero on TV, my friend." "You can thank my publicist for that. I keep trying to play it down. All the while she's telling the harrowing story of her survival. I think she would try and get a made-for-TV movie of the ordeal if she could." Ryan leaned back in the chair and swung his feet up on the desk. Don't worry, I'll never see you as a hero. So true. I was scared shitless, Ryan kidded. Anyway, the officials at LAX asked if I wanted to file a police report. I said I'd prefer not to at this point and just asked them to take some pictures. Woods looked concerned. But we probably should report this, and the text message Kim got. I don't want her getting asked questions back in Detroit. I'm not going to mess up her life if I don't have to. At this point, it's just suspicion anyhow. I respect your wanting to protect her from questions from her husband or anyone else, but if this guy is responsible, then he tried to turn you into a barbecue. Wood stood up and leaned against the dresser in front of the bed, bumping the flat-screen television as he did. Can you investigate and get some more evidence so we can leave Kim out of it? Ryan asked. Of course I can, but I'm still not sure I like this. It was attempted murder. Trust me, I know, Ryan replied. But let's wait if we can. Wood stood up straight. Well, nothing in his record showed up indicating that he has any kind of mechanical knowledge to have done this. But he is from Minneapolis, and I have a friend who is a detective with the police department there who owes me a favor. He might be able to fill in that missing link for us. Ryan chuckled. Is there anyone who doesn't owe you a favor? It's the only way I can get anything accomplished as a private detective without the resources of the department. I've had to tail more than a few officers' cheating wives just for access to a police database. Woods laughed. Anyway, you'd like this detective. He's a freak ginger just like you. Angela sat in the back of a black town car, aimlessly looking out the window onto the dark LA skyline. She was pretty pleased with herself, and it had been a good day. Not only had her client gotten an absurd amount of publicity, but she had also gotten more than her fair share, making her name even more recognizable as an agent and publicist. This was like gold in this city. The best part was that the picture she had released of Ryan was already old news and was dwarfed by the miraculous landing he had pulled off. At least, that was how she was referring to it. She had left her car at home and hired the town car for the day so she could work and make calls between interviews. Looking ahead at the driver, she noticed for the first time that he was pretty fit and attractive. Probably another actor wannabe, she thought, working to pay the rent and trying out for every bit-part job he could get. But he wasn't too bad looking, and she was horny. Already wet from the energy coursing through her from the day and her overwhelming physical needs, Angela hiked her skirt up, exposing her panties, and began to rub herself through the fabric, very aware that the driver was focusing more on the rearview mirror than on the road ahead of him. "Do you like what you see?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," the driver answered, briefly taking his eyes off of her long enough to keep the car on the road. Sliding her hand in through the top of her light purple panties, she slid a finger inside of her and then back out, wet, to rub it over her clit, as she spread her legs open even more. She leaned her head back against the headrest and closed her eyes. "Can I help you?" the young driver asked, causing her to open her eyes again. She smiled her devil smile at him and replied, "Park this thing and come back here." The driver looked around for a few moments until finding a parking lot, then swung the town car into it and parked. As he opened his door and closed it, turning towards the rear door, Angela noticed the very large erection protruding from his dress slacks. The perfect end to the perfect day, she thought to herself as he opened the door beside her.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on bigworldnetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.